Hey everybody, this is Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. We've got a really good and exciting Figured Out Baseball podcast today. I guess you could call this our first Figured Out Softball podcast. It's the first time that we've had a softball coach joining us for a podcast, so I'm a little bit nervous. We'll see how I do talking to a softball coach, see if I can hold my own here and ask some decent questions. But we're being joined by Paige Knussman. She is the assistant coach at William Peace University, a Division III school in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'll give you a background on Paige before we jump into questions with her. She went to Easton High School in Maryland, where her team won 2 state championships. She played collegiately at Salisbury University from 2013 through 2016. Salisbury is a Division III school in Salisbury, Maryland. She had a really terrific playing career there. Her team played the National Championship Series every year from 2013 through 15, including 2014, where her team was the national runner-up. In 2015, Paige was named the Salisbury Regional Tournament Most Outstanding Player. She was a first-team all-conference player all 4 years at Salisbury. She was a 2-time first-team All-American. She still holds the conference record for career batting average. And for her career, guys, Paige hit .448 for her career, for her 4-year career. Pretty amazing. She finished second in conference history with 192 career RBIs. Her senior year, she was a finalist for National Player of the Year as named by the NFCA and SHUT. She was a top 25 or one of the top 25 finalists for the National Player of the Year. Pretty amazing. She has been coaching since 2017. From 2017 through 2019, she was an assistant coach at Salisbury, her alma mater. Her team in those 3 years compiled a total record of 74 and 45. She helped. She assisted with the hitters and catchers as well as several other things while she was there. The 3 years that she was at Salisbury as a coach, the offenses, the whole team offense hit .320, then .354. And then .324. So 3, again, really good offensive seasons for Salisbury when Paige was an assistant coach there. 2020 was her first spring as an assistant coach at William Peace. So Paige, I really appreciate you spending some time with us on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff.
So with most of the podcasts that I do, Paige, I try to start out with something that stands out from the bio. And for you, obviously, an unbelievable playing career at Salisbury. And I think sometimes players that are such good players, sometimes it is challenging to jump into the coaching side of things because you probably had a lot of natural gifts and talents that a lot of your players now don't have, and a lot of things came very easy for you that are challenging for players. I know, with Major League Baseball, it seems like a lot of the really good managers and coaches were guys that didn't make it very far, guys that made it through, to high A or double A, or maybe a guy that made it to the big leagues that wasn't very successful. It seems like the really successful major leaguers, don't often make very good major league coaches. I'm just kind of wondering how the transition was for you to go from player to coach, and how that's been for you just to try to learn some of the struggles that a lot of your players have that maybe you didn't necessarily have because you were such a good college player. How has that transition been for you to go from, playing and just this is your 4th year coaching? How's that transition been for you? Yeah,
when I first started coaching, it was a difficult transition. I'm very competitive, and not being able to, lace up, put your uniform on, and go out on game day competing, it was a challenge, especially being with my alma mater still. Over the years, I've kind of gotten a little bit better at stepping back. I still have to think every day, it's not me out there, it's someone else. And being 4 years removed from it makes it a lot easier. But, I think if I had been a little bit more open to criticism and instruction when I was a player, maybe I could have been even better. And that's what I try and think of now as a coach is, not every athlete is going to be completely open with you. You have to find a way to get through to them and get their trust. And, I've definitely seen that both at Salisbury and now at William Peace. So,
how much did Coach Knight, who was the head coach at Salisbury when you were there and a legendary softball coach, how much did she impact your career? And you said that if you had maybe been open to more criticism there, I mean, you coached for somebody who was just a really really well-known, really, really successful softball coach, a long-time softball coach. How much did she have an impact on you as a coach? So, like, now that you're coaching and you're looking back at what your playing experience was like and your experiences with Coach Knight, how much did that experience help to shape you as a coach and how you go about things now?
Oh, yeah, tremendously. I mean, going all the way back to high school, my second set of high school coaches, one of them actually played for Coach Knight. So I kind of got indoctrinated in the Salisbury way a little bit earlier than some people would have. Got to Salisbury, I actually, I guess you could consider me a walk-on. I did not commit to them. I was into the spring season of my senior year and had no idea what I was doing for college. And, I was really kind of getting nervous. I was down to the wire. We were approaching graduation. And my parents just kind of looked at me and said, you need to think about a state school, someplace that, might be a good option for you. So that's kind of how I ended up at Salisbury with Coach Knight. And looking back, I always say it was one of the best decisions that ever happened to me and for me. I mean, how many people can say they had a career like I did where they got to go compete for a national championship every year and got to be a part of every moment almost. I walked in, got to play as a freshman. Not everybody can say that, and I earned that time. Coach Knight, she was tough. I definitely did not get along with her as well as I probably should have as a player. It's tough when coaches see something in you that they know they can bring out of you and make you better. They find ways to push buttons and get you to push yourself past your limits. And I think that's the one thing Coach Knight was really good at, was being able to find that one thing that just made players go above and beyond to prove her wrong, or prove just anyone wrong, to say that I deserve to be out here competing and that I've earned this position. So she gave me an opportunity to be her grad assistant coming out of school. I learned so much from her, a completely different side of the game than I did as a player. I got to play multiple positions for her as a player. I came in as a third baseman and really only DH'd my first 2 years. One of my teammates beat me out for the third baseman position. She had earned the position. I didn't. And that was a tough adjustment in the beginning, but to still be able to contribute on the other half of the game was great. And then by the time I was a junior, I was on the other end of the field, off the other corner at first base. And then senior year came, we didn't have a catcher really, and next thing you know, I was catching again. So to be able to step up and learn from Coach Knight in those positions in college and then be able to apply that in the coaching realm really gave me the jump start that I needed.
So do you have similar conversations now with players? I mean, maybe not so much at Salisbury, and I know you just finished your first year at William Peace, but are those conversations that you feel like you can have with your players now, just when someone comes in and maybe they're not in the role they want to be as a freshman or a sophomore or whatever it is? Do you think that's an experience you can relate to and just say, hey, I was there, but this is what you have to do to get what you want? Do you feel like that experience helped you to be able to have that conversation with other players in the future?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I try and be very open with my players. If I'm off a day, I try and make sure that they know that, hey, I'm sorry about this. I'm going to be better tomorrow, and I'm trying to hold myself to a high standard. I hold them to high standards, and being younger, I'm not so close in age that they don't respect me, but they can still relate to me. I've earned the respect that I know that they have for me, especially after this past season. 2020 has been so tough on most spring programs and all athletic programs in general. But, planning practices and being out there every day and putting the time in, I think I can be a little bit more open and have those conversations with them and say, hey, I know that this might not be what you're hoping for right now, but do it now and maybe you'll get to where you want to be next year or in a couple weeks from now even.
So Coach Knight, for anyone that's not familiar, it's Margie Knight. She has better than an 800 career win percentage at Salisbury, which is incredible. More than 800 wins in her career. Incredible numbers. Did she give you any advice when you started as a grad assist? And I'll give you just an example of this, and I've said this in one other podcast before, I believe, but when I first started coaching, the other assistant coach on the staff of my first job one of the things that he told me early in my career, because I didn't say much as a player. I was the same as you. I started coaching where I played. I wasn't nearly as good as you, so most of the guys around me were better than I was, and all of a sudden I was coaching them, and that was a little bit of a weird transition. But when I went out to work some camps in the summer, that was something I was going to try to do just to learn more and to get my name out there and like meet some people and whatnot. One of the other assistant coaches that I worked with basically said, Jeff, when you go out this summer, keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything. Let people notice you by how hard you're working. Keep your mouth shut and your ears open and just work as hard as you can and catch people's attention that way. And that was something I will never forget. And some of the best advice I got as a young coach. Did Coach Knight have anything for you when you first started? Like just knowing what your personality was like as a player, and then you're going to be transitioning to a coach, obviously at the alma mater where you just played with a lot of these people. Did Coach Knight or anybody else on staff have any words of wisdom for you that sort of helped you get your feet on the ground?
Oh, I don't even know if I can narrow it down to just one. I've known Coach Knight for going on 8 years now, so it's been a while. I can't say that she gave me one specific, but I was literally just talking to her last week and discussing, hey, this, I told her about coming on this podcast, and she was like, that's great, blah, blah. She constantly gives me advice all the time. I'll call her just for the smallest thing, say, hey, what would you do in this situation? Or how do you think I should approach this topic? So I don't know if there's one specific piece, but she just serves as a mentor in general.
It's funny how you end up having a better relationship with your coach when you leave, right? And that was the same with me. Again, go back to my college days. I didn't have a great relationship with my college coach. I honestly didn't think that he liked me. I didn't think that he had a lot of respect for how I did things. But then as soon as I graduated, he offered me a position on the staff, and then I have a better relationship probably now. And it's been 13 years since I was there. I probably have a better relationship with him now than I did even at that time, and he's someone that I can, be pretty open and honest with and ask him about some certain things and get his opinion. But it's funny how that stuff happens. And I would say that it sounds like it was the same for you. So at what point did you kind of flip the switch where, or maybe it was even in your playing days, but you said that Coach Knight was tough on you and that there were things that she thought she could get out of you. At what point did the switch sort of flip that your relationship started to get better? You started to be able to talk to her and trust her and have a more open relationship with her. Was it when you started coaching, or was it some point during your playing career?
Yeah, I think as I grew under her, got into my later years, junior, senior year, my respect for her grew. You can't not respect the woman. She's proven over and over again that she deserves to be at the top of the game, top of the Hall of Fame board. Just the stats teams would put up, our power numbers, just the wins in general, and the amount of trips to the World Series and the national championship, excuse me. I definitely think it probably switched more when I was a coach. She did a great job keeping the boundary of coach and player separate. It never bled into the friend category, which is what you need to be successful. You can't be your player's friend. You have to be their coach. You have to be able to correct them and push them and get that burning drive out of them. And you're not going to do that by, patting someone on the back and saying, oh, we'll get it the next time, So I definitely think the respect was always there. But it doesn't always mean that I had to like or enjoy or agree everything that she decided as a player. I just had to do it and respect that and know that it was for the best interest of the team. And as I got to be a coach and came on her staff, I got privileged to the inside scoop, I guess you could say. She would have more conversations about why she was doing what she was doing, or she might come to the coaching staff and say, hey, what do you think about this, or who do you think we should go with today, this person or this person? And the one thing I really respect about her is she always let me have my opinion. Even as a first-year or second-year coach, she always took my opinion into account, and sometimes she listened to it, and sometimes she didn't. That was ultimately her decision to make. But my relationship with her now is so polar opposite from what it was as a player. I didn't just drop into the office just to talk and hang out, I went to her if I needed something, or, I needed to get something done for her, and I showed up to the practice field and game field. And I think I was definitely a perfectionist, as I think a lot of talented athletes are. You want to see results immediately, and you just won't stop until you get those results. But yeah, I think, my relationship with Coach Knight definitely became closer and more solidified as I became a coach.
Now that you're coaching, Paige, do you want to be the type of coach that Coach Knight was? Meaning, from what I'm gathering from you, just be, pretty hard on players and like expecting a lot, and I mean that in a very good way, expecting a lot out of players, being able to look at a player and realize when you can get more out of them and how to do that, and not having such a maybe the most friendly type of relationship while people are on campus, but knowing that just like your relationship did, that later on your relationship can get better, and you can sort of, when you have a player on campus, you have a player that you need to treat that player like a player, not like a friend. This is, I'm trying to coach you, I'm trying to get the best out of you. But when that player graduates and even just goes off into their regular life or becomes a coach or whatever, then those boundaries can come down a little bit. Is that the kind of coach that you want to be, or do you want to be more of a player-friendly type of coach where you have a better personal relationship with players when they're on campus? Have you thought much about that? Do you kind of have an idea of what you want to be there?
Yeah, being at William Peace this year, Coach Dobbins has been great. He's kind of let me have free reign. I bring up an idea up to him, and he lets me kind of run with it. It's been great. It's a completely different experience than what I had at Salisbury. Salisbury, I was more sit back and listen and learn, and now I can actually take a more active role in the day-to-day happenings of our program here. I would like to say I want to be my own coach. Coach Knight is Coach Knight. I can't be Coach Knight, and I've had that question asked a lot, especially as she was going through retirement this year. I don't want to be Coach Knight. I want to be Coach Paige. I want to be able to be here for the players, if they need something. Like I said, I'm closer in age to them, so I don't think I'm at a point in my career where I can demand that level of respect that she could and command it on the field. I want to be that person that if something comes up, I'm the first person they call because they just don't know what to do about it. Or, on the flip side, be able to push them, but I want to push them in my own way that I know that, like I said, they respect me. The respect is mutual. We both know we're working toward a common goal, and we're going to figure out a way to get there.
So what do you want to accomplish in your coaching career? You're very young. You're only in your fourth year of coaching. What do some of your goals look like? You seem like a person that's driven, and that where you want to go. It seems like you're that way as a player. I'm going to guess you're that way as a coach as well. Where do you want to go with your coaching career, Paige? What do you want to get out of coaching?
The sky's the limit. Personally, right now my first goal is to be a head coach. I want to run my own program, make the shots, make the calls, do the lineups. I've been able to at least have a taste of that this year. We run a developmental program, so we'll play an extended season in the spring, more than just our traditional 40-game season in Division III softball. We played about 10, 12 extra games, and fortunately I've had the opportunity to coach those and make the lineups and make the decisions. So it's given me that little bit of taste of moving up the chain, if you want to say. But yeah, that's my goal. Is I want to run my own program. I want to be a young, successful head coach. Unfortunately, a national championship title escaped me when I was playing, and that's definitely on my list to accomplish at some point in my career. And being in the Division III model, I think it gets taken for granted a lot, not being on scholarship as student athletes. But I think the players are overlooked a lot because a lot of them are there because they want to be there, and not because they need the money for tuition or because they have to be there because they've been given a scholarship. They're doing it strictly because they love the game, they want to be a part of it, and they're going to work hard to make it happen. That's something I'm very passionate about. It's not some place that I thought I would be. I thought I would end up in a D1 program somewhere. I know I was talented enough to do it, but I'm really glad I didn't. I got to have an experience in college that not a lot of kids can say. I got to work through college, be involved in different organizations. And, that's something that's very near and dear to my heart is the Division III model. And, you know, if God willing, I'd love to be able to stay in this division and be at the top of the game.
So for people that aren't that familiar with the Division III model, can you just talk about just expand on what you just started to say there, just why you like it so much, why you're so passionate about it, and the difference from what you've seen between the Division III level and some other levels. Can you just talk about why you're such a fan of the Division III level and just why you think that maybe it's, you know, why it's a level that you want to stay at and have a lot of success in?
Yeah, you know, like I said, their model is student first, student athlete. So athletes that attend Division III institutions cannot receive funding just strictly on their athletic abilities. It's all merit-based, so what they did in school with their GPA, what they do with their SAT and ACT scores, and then also some of it is need-based, you know how much your parents make, you know, what type of situation you are at home, whether you're a single parent versus a double parent household. That all plays into effect as well. But traditionally it's merit-based, and I love that. You know, you can't just skate by just on your athletic abilities. You know, most of us, I think the saying is we're all going pro in something other than sports later in life, and that's 100% what Division III is. You know, not very many get past the college level to play further than that, and they know that their eyes are not on, you know, staying in the sport forever unless they're looking into coaching. They're looking more into the medical field. You know, a lot of players I played with at Salisbury went on to be nurses. You know, Salisbury was known for being one of the best nursing programs on the East Coast. Phenomenal women have gone through the program, you know, through many of our sports programs, and they're now giving back now in the community. And they would never have had that opportunity if it wasn't for Division III softball. You know, yes, you'll miss practices here and there, but they were always at game day, and most of them finished with high academic numbers. So, you know, the Division III model is definitely more about living your life as a college student. You know, you get to work, hold jobs down. You can go hang with friends on weekends. Traditionally, what we do for softball as a spring sport is we have 5 weeks of practices in the fall. You can fit 16 practices in within those 5 weeks, no more, no less. And then you get no more than 4 hours a day to work with the team. Outside of those 5 weeks, we're hands off. We can communicate with them. We can say, hey, how you doing? But we can't be out on a field with them, coaching them. Can't run hitting drills indoors. And when it comes to strength conditioning, that's completely voluntary outside those 5 weeks. So you kind of have to cross your fingers and hope your players are motivated enough to put the time in when you're not watching them. And when it comes time for the spring season, our coaching staff knows exactly who did the work and who did. It's evident when they're out on the field of who got better, who got stronger, who's not injured is another way. You know, if they've been putting the work in when you haven't been with them, more than likely their bodies are going to hold up better when we get into the, 6 days a week practice schedule. But yeah, I mean, like I said, Division III has given me everything and more, and now it's given me a coaching opportunity too, pretty full time here with a great person. Coach Dobbins is pretty well known in the softball world too. So, will I move into other divisions later on in life? I don't know. Maybe depends on what opportunities come my way. But right now, I want to get back to the division that has given me so much. So,
I think one of the, whether it's fair or unfair, one of the ways that people see Division III is that because of the restrictions in games and practice days, that it's not as competitive. You don't have the as competitive of people there. And I'm not saying this because I'm trying to in any way insult anybody, but I want you to be able to talk about it. I think sometimes people look at Division III like, well, anybody can play at Division III, and it's not that competitive of a level. I mean, you played for nationally ranked teams that had a chance to win a national championship. Could you just talk about the competition level, among your teammates, between your team and other teams, just to give people, again, a better understanding of Division III sports when, unfairly people who are not that familiar with Division III might say, might have a perspective about it where, again, it's not as competitive. They really limit the number of practices and games, so it's kind of it's a way to stay involved, it's a way to keep playing, but it's not necessarily a really competitive level. Can you just talk about that and your experience with that and how competitive your team was and other teams you were competing against?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, myself personally, our Division III institution, most of our athletic programs were national championship contenders. I mean, our men's lacrosse team, I believe, has 12 national championships now. So one of the most decorated programs across the country for any athletic program. Our field hockey team has won several. I mean, my first 3 years at Salisbury, all 4 of our spring sports went to the national championship. I mean, we had representatives from men's and women's tennis. We had a track and field athlete who won 11 national titles individually. Baseball and softball were both at the final 8. I definitely think the label of being not as competitive or anybody can play there is false. It's misleading. But, of course, I had that same outlook on it when I was going through the recruiting process. I mean, it's kind of pushed down your throats to feel that way about it, and it's just now starting to change with the more active role coaches take and working clinics and going to tournaments. You're starting to see a different model when you're out at showcases where I've been able to be a part of a couple where you're actually out on the field with the athletes. So you're coaching them, but you're still getting to evaluate them. Being able to bring good quality athletes, them seeing you as a coach and not for your division is what it's about, is making the connection with the recruit. And the more you start to bring in those top-tier recruits, the less your program will emulate that ideology of everyone seeing Division III as just the bottom of the barrel. It's been growing since even I was a freshman. From 2013 to now, you'll see a lot of conference opponents. Their wins and loss records are starting to even out or jump more toward the win column. Statistically wise, games are tighter, not as high scoring on one end versus another. My personal experience, I got to play with, I think 6 separate All-Americans during my playing tenure. Got to play with the National Catcher of the Year my freshman year. My senior year, myself and 2 other teammates were both first-team All-Americans, and all 3 of us batted over 400. So I think all 3 of us could have easily played at another level, whether it's D2 or D1, but would we have had as big of an impact on the game or the program if we had done that? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Can't really say for sure, but I do know our program would have definitely beaten up on some D1 programs. So, I think you need to look at the school for the school. Do you like the institution? If softball wasn't a factor or any sport, would you still be going there? Would you still be happy there? And I definitely think with COVID now and kind of the dead period that the Division I schools have experienced, and D2 as well, but mostly D1 and will be experiencing until December, is really going to swing recruits toward looking more into D3. It's going to change their whole perspective because there won't be the numbers available that there have been in the past at the D1 and D2 levels.
It's a great way to put it in great perspectives. And I've always, just talking with kids that I try to help point in the right direction, which I still do now. I'm an associate scout. I was a high school coach for a little bit, and just try to help families and kids to understand sometimes just the recruiting process and to help them make the right decisions. And I think what you said about having the impact on the program, I just don't think that can be overstated enough. I know I've said that before in other podcasts, but I think it's so important as a player to realize how much more fun you're going to have if you play a big role on a team. And it's just, it's fact. So if you could have gone to a Division I, but you would have been on a 35-man roster, you'd have been one of the bottom couple of, in the bottom 5 of that roster and wouldn't have had a big role. Whereas your other options are going to Division II or III, that's still a good competitive level, but where you'd have a chance to have a bigger impact. I think in a lot of cases, most people are personally more happy where they can go and have a bigger role in the team. And I think it's a great recruiting tool that I'm sure you use when you are talking with prospective student athletes, is hey, you can come here and have a chance to be an all-conference player, or you can go to a higher level and maybe play a little bit and just say you went there, but I think you're going to have a bigger impact here. And I think that for people that really look internally and see what they want out of their playing career, I think most people want to win, and I think most people want to play. And if you're not doing both of those things, I'm not sure that you're going to have the best career that you feel like you could have. I'm interested.
Totally, I agree.
Go ahead, Paige.
No. I was just going to say I agree with that statement. I mean, and another factor too is, I went to school somewhat close to home. The Division III near me, Salisbury. It was about an hour from where I grew up. Both of my parents were were alumni, and surprisingly, my sister ended up there too and played soccer. So we're a family of seagulls. We bleed the maroon and gold, and that wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't taken a step back and considered a possibility that wasn't necessarily on my mind prior. And I think, again, that's why I really believe in the Division III mentality. It's not just for the bottom of the barrel. It's for kids that want to compete and want to make a difference and change. And I'm really glad to say that I made that decision.
I'm interested to go back in the last couple minutes that we have here to go back to your you as a high school player making the decision to go to Salisbury. What other options did you have in front of you? And I'm curious to know how what was it just because your parents were alums, or was it something else about Salisbury? But I'd like to know what other options you had to really consider as a starting point to this line of questioning.
Yeah, I got into I didn't start travel ball until I was late into 8th grade, so I was kind of behind the curve, you would say, for a lot of people. I mean, people are starting kids in travel ball as early as 8 years old now, which is kind of shocking to me. I guess there's varying levels of commitment to, the travel sports, whether you're 8 years old and playing, you're telling yourself you're playing travel ball twice a year, in tournaments versus every weekend, and being later in the process, it kind of backed up my timeline of progression. I wouldn't say I really came into my own swing until I was maybe a junior or senior in high school, which is very late. I mean, your junior year is your biggest year when you're being looked at for schools. And I made this transition early into 18U, which was great. It got me in front of better competition early and more challenging pitching and hitting. And that's what you need to do. You need to play with the best to beat them. And, as my junior year was not what I would hoped it had been. I kind of didn't play as well as I would have liked. I didn't really know much about the recruiting process in general. Neither of my parents were athletes. So we were kind of going to the massive showcase camps at tournaments, not necessarily committing time to go to institutions that I necessarily wanted to go to or were interested in. And I think that was where it kind of lost me a little bit. Looking back, maybe if I had narrowed down a couple schools that I really, really wanted to go to and put time and energy into going to their camps. But hindsight's 2020. I got into senior year. I was emailing a few schools. They were, reaching back. And then once they'd find out I was a senior in the fall year, they were like, oh, we're full already for your class, this, that. Back then, we were still getting letters from schools. This is 2011 and 12. We were still in the email world, but I was getting letters from schools, some D1s. And I really wanted to go south. You watch on TV growing up as a little girl, you're watching Florida, Alabama, Georgia compete on TV with some of the Pac-12 schools out west. And you think, man, I want to go to those schools. I want to be a part of that program, that culture. And it's unrealistic for a lot of kids. I probably would not have even had a shot at walking onto any of those institutions, despite, my playing career and the stats I was able to put up. Those institutions are some of the top of our game, and that's what we emulate and strive for as players and coaches. But that's where I think my mindset was past what it should have been. I wasn't realistic with myself, and I didn't really have anybody sitting there checking me saying, why don't we redirect your thought process and your, schools you're looking at toward this route. So that's kind of what pushed me into the spring of senior year. I had applied to all the institutions that I wanted to go to, got into all of them, but it would have been more like I'd have to walk on the softball teams there. Several were Division I schools down here in the South. And one day my parents looked at me and said, Paige, you're not going to be getting enough academic money. We don't want you to go into debt for the rest of your life, especially if you're not getting a softball scholarship. You need to look at more affordable options in state. And that's kind of when I started coming through. Salisbury would have been a great option at the time. Like I said, my high school coach played for Coach Knight, so I had a little bit of a connect there. I knew of the coaching staff just through mutual friends, and, playing high school, one of the assistant coach's daughters played against us all the time, so we got to kind of see the coaching staff in other situations. But mostly it was just my parents making a good adult decision for their young daughter who didn't know what she was doing, and saying, you need to think in the future. Their biggest thing was they didn't want me coming out of college with more than a car payment for a student loan. And Salisbury, being an in-state Division III institution, is actually cheaper than a lot of kids would get, even with scholarship money going to a D1 or D2 level. So, for me, that was the best fit for me at the time. Like I said, I didn't think it would be. I had no intention of originally going to Salisbury, and looking back, I will still stand by this. It's one of the best decisions I ever made, and it changed my life.
I'm so glad that you're talking about this, because I think that your experience is so similar to what so many people experience. They kind of don't know what to do. They don't know they don't understand the process that well. They're not being recruited by a ton of schools. They're not quite sure what steps to take. All these things that you experienced, and they're getting some interest from some high level schools. And I think in some cases, people are offered like a 25% scholarship or something like that, but they don't realize what you put together, that, okay, going to this in-state school is still cheaper than going to this out-of-state school on a 25% scholarship. So if the bottom line is that important, I really need to consider, this in-state school that might not be as high profile of a place, but it's going to allow me to come out of here without being up to my elbows in debt, which I think is a really big deal for a lot of people, and something a lot of people experience now. And I'm sure that the experiences they have at a lot of really giant schools, I'm sure it's pretty cool. I'm sure there's a lot of things that are exciting about it, but I also know that when you graduate, as and you start having to pay those student loans off, you're going to be pretty happy that when you make decisions that keep those loans to a minimum. I am curious on the softball side of things. I'm not that familiar with this, with the softball recruiting timeline, and this maybe be the last question I've got for you. Someone that was on your timeline that starts playing travel ball a little bit late, that doesn't have a great junior year, and really comes on as a senior, are there still opportunities for someone in the 2020 world that we're in? Maybe take COVID out of it, because COVID is making a lot of things strange with rosters in general. But like, do you and other coaches that still recruit people that are in their senior year? Like, is there still an opportunity for someone that's in their senior year and has not yet made a commitment and is sitting there maybe panicking? Like, is that absolutely too late, or are there still opportunities that are out there for someone that's in that position? Because I know on the baseball side of things, like, a lot of times if kids don't commit, if people go into like spring of their junior year and they haven't committed yet, or especially if they go into summer after junior year before senior year and they're not committed, like, it's total panic for them. They're like, oh my gosh, everybody I know is committed. It's too late for me. And anybody that I've had that conversation with, I'm like, there's still something out there for you. Like, what's that like in the softball world, and what's the recruiting timeline look like for you and for other schools that you're familiar with?
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate, because it puts so much added pressure on kids that are just kids. Like, I don't understand. I didn't know what I wanted to do, when I was a sophomore, junior, and we're expecting freshmen now to make these major life-changing decisions. And, softball went through a huge overhaul. I believe it was 2 years ago. They pushed the timeline back, which Division I coaches could talk to student athletes. I'm not 100% sure on all of the rules, just because in Division III we don't have the same set of guidelines. We have a little bit more flexibility. But, I think kids just need to take a step back while they're going through the process and try and relax, like take a deep breath. They're not the only ones. I was out this summer and saw at least 10 to 15 2020s in just the few tournaments I went to that were uncommitted. Yes, I'm sure COVID did aggravate the situation some, but, the seniors still had 3 other years. It would be the junior class I would be expecting that more out of, because they lost their junior high school season and many lost the travel season this summer. I think the biggest thing is just getting involved. Like once you do make that jump into travel ball or the recruiting process, and if you think you're a little behind, invest more time into you personally. Maybe don't spend as much money into like the highest level of travel ball. Put more money into your personal growth. Get strength conditioning coaches. Get a hitting coach and go see them on a regular basis until you've kind of refined your skills enough to maybe say goodbye to that aspect on a regular basis and just check in with your hitting coach once in a blue moon. I think just being open to your opportunities as well. Like I said, I think my personal situation, a lot of the problem of me not being committed at an early enough time was just me. Like I was very picky, and like I said, I think I had unrealistic expectations at a portion of my recruiting journey. And I think as kids are going into this year, their senior years, if they were juniors this past year, even rising juniors, it's just understanding what you want out of your college experience and being open to talking to the coaches. I mean, I think I said this a couple weeks ago on Twitter, having open conversation with the coaches and showing that you really care about their institution and that you've done research enough to understand, like, okay, your school is 1,000 students versus this school is 8,000 students. I'm not looking for the 8,000 kid school. I'm looking for the 1,000 kid school. So that's why I know your institution is a good fit for me. I'm more likely to pay attention to a kid that's put that time and effort into an email. It shows that they actually want to be a part of our institution, what our culture is, instead of just the blanket emails maybe coming from a recruiting service, or that they've blind copied 100 different coaches into just to send it out there. And I think that's the biggest misconception is it's not as many coaches as you contact, it's who you contact and how often, like how the relationship is built with that coach that you contact. So that would be my biggest piece of advice is just make sure you're investing time on you and make sure you are your own advocate, because even travel coaches don't know what they're doing. I mean, I was out a lot this summer talking to coaches, asking for brochures, and there's a lot of coaches that don't have contact info ready to go for their kids. And how are you going to get recruited if you don't have contact info for them? So being your own advocate is a big one.
It was amazing to me. So I typically, when I do my scouting, I typically go out and watch high school baseball, but there was no high school this year. So I went out and saw some travel baseball this summer, and you go ask for a coach for a roster, and it astounds me that some of these organizations that have been around for a long time, they don't carry a roster around with them with accurate player numbers and contact information. Like, how am I supposed to know who anybody is, or like how to get a hold of anybody here? Like there was one tournament that I went to that the coach took a picture of a roster for me, and like I couldn't. It was too blurry. I couldn't see. Like I couldn't tell. Is that an 8 or a 9 on that jersey number? I don't know who I'm looking at right now, and it was very frustrating to me. And but I want to point out something else, Paige, that you said that I think is extremely important that I don't think enough people put enough thought into is putting time in investing in yourself. So often at early ages, parents are spending inordinate amounts of money playing travel baseball and softball, when at those younger ages you really should put any money that you've got into just developing yourself and developing your skills, and wait to play on that elite travel team, like you said. Wait to go to the showcases until you're ready. And at younger ages, spend the money on just developing your skills. And I don't know that it makes a lot of sense to spend tons of money on travel on a great travel team when you're too young to be seen, or you're not ready to be seen. Like if you're not the best player you can be, why do you want to showcase yourself if you still have room to get better?
Right. I'm getting emails. I literally got an email yesterday from a 2025 kid. I mean, that makes her what, a 7th grader, 8th grader? It's shocking to me. I'm like, I was thinking about what I was going to do that night for dinner, or who I was going to go see for a friend at that point in my life. I hadn't even started playing travel ball. So, I think that's the biggest thing is just like let kids be kids. And that was what the biggest push in softball side of things was, to try and allow them more time to make those life-changing decisions and not rush to get them done in their freshman and sophomore year because everyone else is doing that too. So, I mean, it's put more time into you, enjoy the game, learn the game. That's the biggest thing is just learn about the game, whatever your sport is at an early age. Put time into the proper mechanics to prevent injuries. And then once you get to that high school time, then start investing time and money into travel ball, because if I had started when I was in 6th or 7th grade, man, I would have been so burnt out. I mean, I was burnt out by the end of my senior year when you're going over half of the weekends in a year somewhere across the country. I mean, we flew probably 4 or 5 times a year. We were driving 5 to 6 hours on a regular weekend, and you'd be gone Thursday through Sunday, and then maybe Tuesday you had practice. So, I mean, that's, like you said, you hit the nail on the head, is just making sure you're investing time into you early on.
Paige, this has been awesome. This is Paige Knussman, everybody. She is an assistant coach at William Peace University in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is our first figured out baseball/softball podcast, and Paige, it's been really, really enjoyable. This has been great. I've really appreciated just your insight and just the perspective you've got and all the time that you gave us today. So, Paige, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you. I mean, thanks for allowing me to share my insight and perspective on the game.